US-China, the fragile truce. Buying time or building toward conflict? And that's a question that we need to ask ourselves. Because right now, what you are seeing essentially the US and China talking and coercing and discussing with the idea, and the market is waiting. The market is actually waiting to see what's going to happen between the two of them. And the expectation is that they are going to do a trade deal, right? We want a trade deal between the US and China. That is not going to happen. What you're seeing, this is my analysis, is you're basically seeing both of them buying time, not making deals. I mean, they'll come to an understanding. They will come to a truce, right? Where they'll talk and they'll agree on certain things and give and take. But that's not going to be a deal. And the idea is that they are simply buying time. They have realized that they are going to need to split. They know that they're going to need to decouple. The US and China are in the process of decoupling. It's going to take years, but it's happening. Well, that's not bad. So everybody goes home and do their own thing. Well, not really. And I will explain to you, while it is a good thing that they're buying time, it is a good thing that the market likes the idea that they're building time, and it's a good thing that ultimately they should manage to be able to actually agree on something. It is not good over the long term, because you might be actually building toward a conflict. And by that, the current calm that you're seeing, right? The current calm that you're seeing in the market, and is specifically in what's going on with the Chinese and the Americans, what you're really seeing is a calm, but I would not rest too much on it. Why? Well, essentially, they are buying time. What does that mean? Well, both sides are quietly using this lull that's going on right now, this going back and forth to buy time. China, in order to become self-sufficient in critical technology, and the US, in order to rebuild its supply chains and reduce dependency on Chinese materials. That is what's happening. Beneath the veneer of diplomacy lies a slow motion race towards economic separation, with a narrow window before competition turns into confrontation. So basically what they're saying is, we want a divorce, but we can't do it in front of the kids. So what we're going to do is we are going to talk, we're going to agree, we're going to discuss, but at the end of the day, China knows that it wants independence. And the U.S. definitely wants independence from China in terms of rare earth minerals, in terms of semiconductors, in terms of pharmaceutical items. That is something that the U.S. administration have been talking over and over and over. And if you've been listening, you will realize that this is important. So right now, what they're doing is they're just buying time until economic separation. And that's okay. The thing is, many things could happen between here and then where they don't get to separate amicably. They don't get to do it. And if you're going to do it, that is where you're going to have a problem. And I'll explain to you what this means. Well, essentially, what is China's objective here? China is not seeking reconciliation. They're seeking resilience. Beijing is pouring over $47 billion through the big fund into domestic fabrications like SMIC and YMTC to close the gap in chip making capacity. That's what they're doing right now. In terms of material and equipment, they're expanding control of gallium, germanium, all the rare earth rare earth refining, while developing local EDA alternatives. What does that mean? Now, we're basically they realize that the U.S. know what they're doing, and so basically we're racing slowly but surely into a separation. They are shifting sensitive tech flows through intermediaries in Malaysia, Vietnam, and Singapore. So what they're also doing there, quite frankly, is that they are expanding their reach within the region, ultimately being a global, local player in Asia and controlling that market. They're strong enough. Now remember, 50% of the world GDP is split between the US and China. So China's leadership view this as a 5-year industrial sprint. Well, we're sprinting using every diplomatic pause to solidify domestic foundation before facing renewed US containment. And frankly, the US knows that as well. So what you're seeing is political theater. We have political theater at home with everything that's going on with the shutdown, but you also political theater going there as well. We're meeting, is my friend, we're going to get along. Don't believe any of that. The objective of China right now is they're racing towards, they have a 5-year sprint right now. Now, what is the U.S. objective? Well, the U.S. approach, and talked about it enough, it's defensive reindustrialization. You got to start making the stuff in the U.S. Simple as that. Defensive. So obviously you've heard over and over and over the critical minerals and rare earth. You have the CHIPS Act, the IRA, the Defense Production Act. These are all initiatives that are funding new mines, refineries, and recycling centers in Texas, California, Canada, and Australia. So obviously, a couple of days ago, by the way, the rare earth stocks didn't do so well. Why? Well, because they saw that there were going to be an agreement between China and the U.S. So I guess the pressure is off on the rare earth minerals stocks. Don't believe that for a second. And if you join my channel, I will show you some of the stocks that I'm selecting in that category, because there's a way for you to take advantage of that. Allied Fabrication Network, they're building the chip NATO through joint fabrication with TSMC, Samsung, Intel, to ensure secure semiconductor supply. And in that process, what the government is doing is they're taking position in those stocks to ensure that it happens. You might agree with the idea of a U.S. government getting involved with stocks of companies, U.S. companies, but they are part of this defensive reindustrialization. They want to make sure the stuff is going to get done, it's going to get done quickly, and it's going to get done right, and it's going to get done without China. Of course, you have the tariff leverage, maintaining high tariffs on strategic goods, EV, solar panel, steel, not just for protectionism, but as a bargaining power until new domestic capacities matures. See what they're doing? They're basically getting ready. Both sides understand that the next 2 to 5 years are decisive. A race to de-risk faster than the other can adapt. Well, let them do their thing. Right? And obviously, Pakistan and India are an integral part of this situation. Why? Well, because in this process, the U.S. can't do it all on its own. So therefore, they want to bring India or Pakistan. In fact, they're doing probably more overture towards Pakistan, believe it or not, than India with the 50% tariff. And India, that's actually buying oil from the Russian. But although that's not what the U.S. is really concerned about. What the U.S. wants out of India is they want them to actually, start buying the soybean from the U.S. In fact, that's also a very big point that U.S. is doing with China right now. And they say, buy my soybean. And guess what? Very recently, they haven't been buying anything from the U.S. in terms of, well, those farmers are a big part of the political backbone of Republican Party. So therefore, they need to do that. So both sides are basically, over the next 2 to 5 years, are in a race to de-risk faster than the other can adapt. Not so bad. Hold on. Let me make sure your point number 2. So what could derail this strategy? What could happen that doesn't happen? And if that doesn't happen, what's going to happen next? Well, you could have economic and industrial delays. The U.S. projects, it faces labor and cost overruns. China still lacks precision chips tools and advanced lithography. Any major delay invites political backlash and accelerates decoupling measures. What does that mean? Well, as the U.S. is trying to do that, and you could hear, right, the rumbling, especially, the Democrats right now, not so much, but you could hear rumbling in terms of the labor force and the cost overruns. This is going to be expensive. And what do you mean you're taking over Intel? What do you mean you're taking over quantum computing? Meaning, what do you mean you're buying into those companies? It's going to increase the delays. Any delays or any economic, what about we're going to have a recession in the U.S., right? All of this could delay what the U.S. is trying to do, what the government is trying to do. Political triggers, that's a big one, both in the U.S. and in China. The U.S. elections may push Washington to a more aggressive containment for domestic optics. Do something about it. You're too lenient with the Chinese. I mean, they have a huge amount of tariffs being built up in Congress right now. The Chinese, on the other hand, are facing slowing growth and youth unemployment and deflation, which could turn to nationalist escalation to maintain legitimacy. Meaning, listen, what are you doing? You're fighting with the U.S. We can't sell our products anymore. And don't forget, the U.S. is 25% GDP of the world. You can't ignore the U.S. You have to do something with it to buy from them. Otherwise, the youth and there's deflation and unemployment in China. They need to face. I mean, don't forget, China is not doing so great. China is having lots of issues. So how long does it take before, before the 3 years or the 5 years are up? This is unsustainable for the population. We need a bad guy. Therefore, nationalistic escalation. Therefore, let's get to the next step. European and Asian partner breaking ranks with Washington could erode collective leverage. That's exactly why the U.S. administration has been asking and telling the European, do your part as well. Tax. 100% tax to China if they buy oil from the Russian. Do the same thing with the Indian. You're not doing it. You're not with me. You need to spruce this up. Let's do business together. External shocks, financial crisis, energy supply disruptions, new wars could destabilize both nations' timelines. See, they're basically saying, leave us alone. We're buying time. We got to get this thing separated, but you're bothering us. And if we can't get it done and this get out of control, there's going to be a lot of damage. And that's why you're seeing very often the stock market reacting negatively when they don't see something that's never going to happen, which is a deal. But at least you have the inkling of some sort of understanding, because if you don't have an understanding, then you have a collapse. And that's not good, because they can't be without each other. But they can't be with each other either. I'll tell you, it's a divorce. They're just buying time to get to the lawyer. So if the truth collapses, escalation will likely unfold in distinct but overlapping phases. First of all, what's going to happen? You're going to have economic retaliation. I mean, if China restricts exports of like they've kind of threatened, if China restricts export of the rare earth minerals, that's going to launch investigation targeting Western tech firms, for example. They're going to signal reserve diversification. Hey, we're giving too much. What the U.S. going to do? Well, they're going to expand the entity list, tighten export bans, and raise tariffs on EV batteries. So basically, what's a result here? You have an economic Cold War without direct confrontation. Be careful. Direct confrontation, that's a key word. Number two, phase two could be the tech blockade and cyber retaliation. So the U.S. will pressure, TSMC, which is Taiwan Semiconductors, and Japanese tools makers to halt all advanced node shipments to China. And you've seen it, right? You've seen it happening here and there, especially when it came down to NVIDIA. Don't send them the better chips. Let's keep the better one for ourselves. China could retaliate with battery and solar component cutoffs and increase cyber intrusion on U.S. infrastructure. You get nasty. Cloud AI and data localization policies split the digital world into parallel ecosystem. So now, supply chains fragment irreversibly. You don't know what's going on. You can't get anything on time. It's a mess. Phase three, geopolitical spillover. That's the one you have to be careful. Because you have Taiwan, the South Chinese Sea incident escalates into a blockade or drone skirmish. Right? That's always a possibility. And you have to be careful. And you have to be very careful because basically China is holding, Taiwan on the side, say whenever I'm ready to go at it, I'm going to use Taiwan. I'm just going to invade Taiwan because you don't want me to invade Taiwan. It's going to be a problem, and that's what's going to happen. You have to be very careful. So the Taiwan and South China Sea incident could escalate into a blockade. The U.S. would impose SWIFT restriction and coordination action like they did. The SWIFT is how you move the money around the world. That's exactly what they have done with Russia. China retaliates with shipping and export controls. It could escalate one step at a time. Forget the stock market in this process, obviously. And you need to realize that. So phase four, you could have what is called a systemic fragmentation. Two economic blocks hardens. US, EU, Japan, India block. Well, let's see if India comes along. And then you have the China, Russia, Middle East, part of Asia and Africa. Two separate blocks. Global tech the tech standards, the currency and logistic network bifurcate. You have two worlds that could potentially collide with each other. So this time-buying detente is inherently unstable. That's what this means. It is very unstable. Each success in de-risking reduces interdependence, which is in the very glue that preventing open conflict. So each success, listen to this, is de-risking reduces, right? Each success in de-risking reduces interdependence. So if you can't de-risk, then you have interdependence, which in the very glue preventing the open conflict, because they can't really fight openly with each other because they need each other. And as both sides grow stronger and more self-reliant, the incentive to compromise shrinks. So as you could see, for example, look at what's happening with earth minerals. The Chinese have 90% of the processing and 70 to 80% of the production. You can't do without them. So they're controlling the situation. Now, of course, if you're the Chinese, say, look, I got you. And if you're the US, wow, damn, how did we get to that point? But that's not going to last for too long. Well, I know that. But in the meantime, it will take the US about 10 to 12 years to get that kind of independence from China as far as the rare earth minerals. And be careful, wars have been started for less than that. World War II. Why did Japan get into World War II? Well, because there was a blockade by the US. So the likely end game of this situation isn't reconciliation. It is structured rivalry under permanent economic tension. That's going to go on. And of course, and that's why I want you to join my channel, because I'm going to show you how to take advantage of that. That's going to create volatility. You've seen it the past couple of weeks. Each time the US and China are not agreeing, the market collapses. So, number one, short-term calm versus long-term peace. Both powers are preparing for separation, not cooperation. Number two, their decoupling is the new deterrence. Economic resilience has replaced nuclear parity as the new measure of strength. It's not how many more weapons you have. They realize that. Is can you make your own products? The risk isn't one big shock. It's escalation by accumulation. Every mirror sanction, embargo, cyber probe can stack towards systemic rupture. And of course, number four, global allies will shape the outcome. And this is where India and Pakistan and Japan, and you've seen recently the administration is over in Asia, right, making deal with Korea. The point is, global allies will shape the outcome. Who's coming on your side? Whether Japan, India, and the EU align consistently will determine if decoupling is orderly or chaotic. But they got to pick a side. And that's where you could see when the president actually went to, told India, stop whatever you're doing, 50%, 40%. You have got to start choosing a side. The U.S. and China relationship operates now in a race within a truth, right? A fragile pause before a deeper strategic realignment. Unless both sides establish credible guardrails for technology, this mutual time buying could evolve into a decade-long economic Cold War. One not defined by bombs. Nobody wants to kill each other, but by microchips, mineral markets. Market's going to collapse. You can't get things. You lose your job. You don't have all the medication that you want. That is the issue. That is what you need to be concerned about, because that's a potential reality. And the stock market obviously is reacting, very well right now. I mean, as you could see, it's not too bad, right? Market is more or less doing okay right now. But then again, because we're going to have some rate cuts. So at the end of the day, what is China's objective? Well, they want to buy time to achieve tech self-sufficiency. Right now, they're funneling massive subsidies into domestic fabs. Their goal is to move from 7 nm production to variable 5 nm capability by 2026, 2027, using only Chinese control supply chain. Each diplomatic thaw buys time for this pipeline to mature before the U.S. export bonds tighten further. Materials and equipment independence, developing Chinese equivalents to ASML, lithography, and U.S. EDA tools, expanding domestic refining to rare earth minerals, dual-use technology shielding, redesigning supply routes through neutral intermediaries, Malaysia and Singapore. What is the U.S. trying to do? Well, the U.S. is buying time to de-risk critical supply chains. That's what they've been talking about over and over and over and over. You have the CHIP Act, the IRA, the defense production. They need to go to the allied fabrication base, Intel, TSMC. But the U.S. wants to chip NATO by the late 2020 so that military and AI supply chains are insulated from Beijing. Tariff hikes is going to be something they're going to be able to do. So the logic here, basically, neither side want a full-scale rupture yet, but China still needs access to Western markets and capital flows to stabilize its economy. And they know that. And the U.S. needs time to physically build the alternative infrastructure, the mines, the refineries, the fabs. The fabs are basically where you make the semiconductors. So both sides are playing a race within a truce. They shake hands in public while quietly racing towards economic self-reliance and strategic insulation. So the buying time strategy, which is a managed decoupling under a diplomatic ceiling, depends on fragile assumptions. It's not just easy to let's just do it. Well, lots of things. It's like you're unstickling yourself. You're having a divorce. Who's getting the kids? Who's getting the house? Who's taking the dog? It's complex. A managed decoupling under a diplomatic ceiling depends on fragile assumption. Several forces could easily blow it up. A, structural derailers, economic and industrial friction. You could have supply chain timeline could slip. The Chinese tech bottlenecks, right? Beijing's self-sufficiency drive still depends on imported high-end lithography. Financial decoupling spirals, a restriction on U.S. capital and venture investment in Chinese tech could accelerate, drying up liquidity for joint ventures that keep some cooperation alive. Right? So essentially what you're having two countries representing 50%. Don't forget to join this channel, to subscribe, and to become a member, because I show you how to take advantage of that. You could join my Patreon channel as well. You have two countries that represent 50% GDP of the world GDP, and they're not going to agree on anything. They are in the process of decoupling very slowly, slow divorce. But as they're doing it, it's like gum, right? It's not going to be easy to pull away. You have to be careful, because if you snap it, you could have stock market crash, you could have a war, you could have supply chain disruptions. Be careful. This is a real thing. I mean, don't forget, U.S. election dynamics are coming to make things even more complicated in 2026 and 2028. The populist Congress or new administration could adopt an all-out containment posture, removing the facade of stability talks. Now we're not talking. Let's go straight, like the U.S. did with Russia. How did that work out? When the Democrats decided to oust the Russian from the SWIFT system and from because of the war in Ukraine, look what that did. It brought the Chinese and the Russian closer together. You could have a Chinese political calculus. Economic slowdown, youth unemployment may compel to the Chinese premier to pivot from potential industrial buildup to external confrontation. If people in China start losing jobs and it doesn't do well, you could say, listen, I mean, let's do something against the other people. It's not my fault, it's their fault. You have allied divergence, maybe Japan, South Korea, and that's why the president is over there right now, that Japan and South Korea and the EU and India are all pursuing their own de-risking agendas. How is it all going to work together? We are living in a very precarious time right now. If one of them cuts a separate deal with Beijing, U.S. leverage fragments. That's the reason why at some point when the U.S. administration was pushing on Europe, they took a trip to China to see how they could avoid the tariffs. But they realized it's tough for them to get along with the Chinese when the Chinese are supporting the Russian, which are fighting against Ukrainian, and Europeans don't particularly like that. So Taiwan, any incident Taiwan is going to be the excuse if something is going to start, right? If China realizes, the U.S. is playing hardball, we're not going to be able to get them to change. So let's start something. And you know what that usually means. It's not a good thing. It usually is not a good thing when you want to start this kind of stuff, because we're talking confrontation here. It's not impossible. You got to watch this very carefully. You could have what we call a black swan catalyst. This is what this channel is about. This channel is about looking for black swan, and this is a major black one. Financial crisis or debt shock, the U.S. Treasury funding squeeze, or a Chinese real estate collapse could upend both nations. I mean, right now the U.S. Treasury, is a problem. The U.S. owes a lot of money, and Chinese real estate is collapsing. So if that gets shaken out, that is going to impact the ability to get this de-risking going. Technology surprise, a disruptive breakthrough. I don't know, quantum computing, advanced AI chips could shift the balance and make the other side abandon restraint. They say, oh my God, now we can't do anything. Now we have to do something. This is very, very delicate. A regional conflict. Escalation in the Middle East on the NATO could force the U.S. to divert resources, giving China a strategic opening. So basically what they're doing is say, kids, you need to be quiet because mommy and daddy need to talk serious talk as we're going to be. Don't cry. shut the door. We cannot have all this because otherwise we're going to blow the whole thing up. This US China time buying phase is unstable. It works slowly. They could keep talking like you're seeing right now, and then slowly the de-risking. But it works as long as both economies remain just interdependent enough to avoid an escalation, that industrial policies keep advancing fast enough to justify patience, and domestic politics on both sides can sell moderation to their publics, because you got to sell that to people. I mean, it's almost impossible. This cannot happen without a disaster at the end of the day. And that's what. No, if it collapses, what is this going to look like? Well, what's going to happen is the first one, weaponized interdependence. So basically, what the China could retaliate through resource and market shock points, mineral embargoes, which they're kind of hinting at it already with the rare earth mineral. They could consumer boycotts and regulatory harassment. Tesla, Apple, all these companies are being abused and harassed in China. Financial signaling. They could slow U.S. Treasury purchases, which they have started for the first time in a long time. For the first time in a long time, the UK are now the largest holders of U.S. Treasury. In the past, they used, not the largest, but in the past, the UK has passed China as the largest holder of U.S. Treasuries. So that's already happening. The signs are there. I know the sign. I'm sure people geopolitically astute in Washington already know those signs as well, and they're paying attention. The U.S., what is the U.S.? The U.S. is not going to do anything. They could counter via finance and semiconductors. They could block any U.S. technology, even via foreign intermediaries, from reaching Chinese AI, quantum, and chip firms. Stop them from going there. They could enforce screening of ventures, private equity. They could escalate the tariff, which they have started to do. So both sides absorb the pain, but remain a controlled escalation zone. Phase 2 could be a tech blockade or cyber retaliation. One-side escalation causes visible harm, chip shortage, cyber infiltration, right? Likely response, you could have a tech blockade, cyber escalation, AI and data control. U.S. restrict Chinese access to global cloud AI platform, AWS, Google iCloud, Azure. Then, of course, you could have a geopolitical spillover. Again, back to Taiwan and South Sea potential incident. Drone collision, blockage, misfire. There was 2 planes that actually crashed over the U.S. plane in Asia not too long ago. You could have maritime pressure campaign, technology sanction blitz, and allied militarization. Don't forget, the allies in the middle say, hey, guys, what are we going to do in the middle? And phase 4, you could have global realignment. So what that means is, well, which side are you on? US, EU, Japan, are you coming in? There was a deal with Japan recently. India, not so sure. Then you have China, Russia, part of Asia, Africa, Middle East, right? You're going to have 2 blocks. You're going to have a currency fragmentation and a global tech standard. You're going to have a split in terms of 5G versus 6G, EV batteries. So this escalation wouldn't explode overnight, but it would lay it up. And that is something that you need to kind of worry about, because that could be an issue, I think. And that is what you need to worry about, because if they can't get along, which they really can't, and of course you're going to say, but why is this happening now? Why didn't we have this problem before? Well, for the past 20 years, basically, China has been building up its ability to circumvent the U.S. Maybe that was the goal all along. I don't think they're looking for war, but be careful, because if this decoupling doesn't happen fast enough in the right way, then you could end up, they could end up invading Taiwan, and then the U.S. has to do something, and before you know it, you start exchanging fire. And then don't forget, China has been fighting a war with India in the past. in the past. It is all forgotten now, at least for now. But they have been they had fought a war with China. So China is with India. So China is not the most quietest countries, as you know. I mean, the U.S. also hasn't been either. But I mean, the U.S. hasn't fought a war with India, wasn't fought a war with Europe, right? But China has fought a war with China. China has fought a war with India. So that's always a possibility. So we have to keep following this system. We have to keep following. We have to keep understanding to make sure that that is not something that is going to be a problem later on, because it could impact the stock market. It could impact lots of things. So stay tuned and stay alive and stay sharp and understand what's happening.